This guy is the former federal prosecutor, now working as a defense attorney in Southern California. He is all over media, and with more and more legal issues, and now the Supreme Court taking up more and more very relevant cases. He's been all over media. Albert, do you have the David Katz? Where this is on Fox 5 in New York. David
you
is
see
on
the Mark Thompson throw pillow.
Yes, you can. Thank you, David Katz, for repping the Mark Thompson Show throw pillow. Would have liked it actually in front of the diploma if you could next time. So
what?
I'm just saying, I don't mean to restyle your office, but how about it for David Katz, everyone?
Great to be with you.
Well, David, this is remarkable, but you'll contextualize this. The Supreme Court reaching in to take this immunity case, which really helps delay, as I understand it, Trump's court case, even if they rule against the presidential immunity that Trump is trying to get.
Well, with this decision, time is kind of running out for there to be a verdict, guilty or not guilty, in the D.C. insurrection case, the attempt to subvert the election by Trump. That case is kind of running out of time because they've set the hearing now the U.S. Supreme Court has on this presidential immunity. They've set it for the week of April 22nd. Normally, they decide their cases by the end of June. So if this is one and it's a major case, now that they've taken it, obviously, if you're expecting it to be the end of June, let's say July 1st, you count about 2 or 3 months that the district judge there in Washington, D.C., Mark, has said that she's going to give them to get to trial. If she holds to that schedule, even a decision that they can proceed with the trial against Trump, that there is no bar, he doesn't enjoy presidential immunity as to these charges. So then what is that? That's, I still count with my fingers, that's August 1st, September 1st, October 1st. Now, there's also a rule that the Department of Justice has that they're not supposed to take politically significant actions that would affect the election within 60 days of the election. But I think there are 2 caveats that make sense. Number one, this all started well before 60 days, and the actions that would be taken, the trial, let's say, during those 60 days, the ongoing trial of Trump, is something Trump asked for. He asked for these delays. He put himself into this window for the Department of Justice, because Jack Smith does work ultimately for the Department of Justice, for him to stand back and say, oh, this rule really bars me from stopping. We have to delay the trial or not pick the jury until after the election. That would seem farcical. And I think the other thing is that the word needs to go out either from Jack Smith or from other people that these defense attorneys for Trump need to make a big plan B if they don't win the presidential immunity argument. And if they do find themselves in trial, bring your motions, do your trial preparation, get all ready. If the district judge said that she was expecting about 88 days from the decision to trial, we were not quite expecting that the 88 days would be 88 days from July 1st. So there may be ways also that the prosecutor can curtail the charges a little bit, pick the most important ones of the charges, so it will be a shorter trial. But right now, it's looking perilous that there would actually be a verdict, guilty or not guilty, before the November election. And of course, that's important because pollsters say maybe 6 or 7% of the people say it would affect their vote. They would be much less likely to vote for Trump, 6 or 7%. And of course, with that will swing the whole election. If there really are 6 to 7% of the people who are going to vote for Trump who would not vote for him, saying, look, I'm not going to vote for someone who's just been unanimously found guilty by a jury of his peers to be the president. I like the guy. I like him more than Biden, but no, I don't like him that much that I'm going to put a felon in the White House. But that doesn't look like it's going to happen now, Mark. It really does not look like there will be a verdict, guilty or not guilty, before early November.
Help me with the unusual move of the Supreme Court to, this is where I really have to understand it, and you can help me. There's a circuit court that's already weighed in on this issue of immunity. They said it's ridiculous. I mean, they really wrote, even a conservative justice I was reading said, a conservative judge said, hey, this is absurd. We can't have there's not an argument for the president not being prosecutable for things that he did that were illegal in office. But the Supreme Court has decided to take this case, or at least do what, David? How unusual is this? What isn't that what happened? What I just described?
Yeah, let me just separate a little bit the procedural from the substantive.
Thank you.
Procedurally, I think the U.S. Supreme Court justices, if they would whisper in your ear, the ones in the middle or on the right, would say to you, delay by Merrick Garland is not an emergency for me. He took over 2 years to even appoint a special prosecutor. That seems quite slow. And the U.S. Supreme Court justices would say to you, we're actually moving quite fast, given the fact that we're going to take this case. Trump wanted it to go back to the D.C. Circuit because in the normal course, if you lose in a circuit court, you can ask the entire court as a group, we call that en banc, to hear it. Maybe you got the three most conservative judges or the three most liberal judges on the bench. You want the entire bench to look at it. And obviously, if a bench were, let's say, 8-3, in a certain direction, but you got the three appellate judges who went for you or against you, you would have a different result en banc. That happens like 0.1% of the time in the real world. But of course, Trump wants to do that because it's more delay. What they have said, if you're looking for the silver lining in the Supreme Court delaying this, is that they did not send it back to the D.C. Circuit for the D.C. Circuit to do it en banc, which is what Trump wanted. They didn't build in even more delay. And there is no reason why, after the week of April 22nd, they couldn't issue a decision May 1st or May 2nd. They don't have to wait until the end of June. So in that sense, I think the U.S. Supreme Court would say, and it only takes apparently 4 of the 9 justices to grant cert. So it doesn't mean that they have 5 votes to say that there is presidential immunity. And if you want to turn substantively to presidential immunity, that seems very far-fetched, except, everyone uses the example, can a president really shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, say during their term of office that they are not indictable as a sitting president, and then say once they're not a sitting president anymore, they have lifetime presidential immunity. And you can imagine some close cases, but the amici curiae, the ones who've gone in and expressed their own opinion, which are basically a bunch of sort of, middle of the road Republicans, people that you've heard of, people who are not with Trump. And they have said, look, there may be some hard cases out there. There might be some line drawing, something that really was close to official acts of the president. But this isn't. This case is easy. This case, you just say, did Trump enjoy presidential immunity for what he's charged with doing? We don't need to discuss and decide every difficult philosophical line drawing thing. Look at this case and the way that they presented the question, which is this very short question. The Supreme Court said, answer this question, you advocates, when you come for your argument in April and in your briefs. Answer this question, which is, does the president and to what extent enjoy presidential immunity for allegedly official acts? And critics have said that's such a broad question. It's so philosophical. It's not the narrow question, and judges are supposed to decide the narrow question, Mark. And the narrow question is, look at what Trump is charged with. Does he have immunity for what he's charged with? And if a president has immunity for what he's charged with, for stealing an election, for calling out this mob when he couldn't get Pence's arm twisted as far as he wanted to twist it, why shouldn't every president do that? Why shouldn't every one-term president try to get a second term? For that matter, why shouldn't a 2-term president try to get a 3rd term that he or she is not entitled to by the Constitution? What is the deterrent for lawlessness, for a despotic one-term president demanding to stay in office, calling out the military, calling out the armed agents who work for the federal government to try to keep power instead of obey the Constitution and give it up? What is the deterrent, for God's sake, if there's lifetime immunity?
If it's such an easy and obvious case, why wouldn't the Supreme Court have just let the lower ruling stand?
Well, Mark and I think you were on the program that day too, we talked about this case called Nixon V Fitzgerald. And it's a very troubling case because a president, in this case, President Nixon, had lifetime immunity from being sued. And it looked like it was a very righteous lawsuit. It was brought after Nixon was the president. Nixon was not granted a pardon from all civil actions. And so it was a live question. And that live question was decided 5-4, that while it seemed like anyone else in America would have been liable for it, and the suit would have gone forward. The suit seemed very righteous on the facts and the law. They said there is lifetime presidential immunity from civil suit. And the 4 dissenters in that case said, this is madness. How can this be the rule? Would there be lifetime presidential immunity from a criminal action? They didn't have to decide it there because Nixon had a pardon. So Nixon was excused from ever standing trial or facing a criminal action. Never had to be decided in Nixon, never had to be decided in any other case. So if you think, well, okay, so it's unprecedented, and that's what the U.S. Supreme Court does, is take unprecedented cases. And I think the other argument that you can make for maybe why they took it, and yet they're going to turn it down in the end, they're going to say there is no presidential immunity for Trump from these charges, is that they're starting to raise that now in a different circuit, which is down in the 11th Circuit with the Judge Cannon case, saying, you know what, if he took the documents from Washington, D.C., well, he had presidential immunity. He was still the president when he took all those documents that he took on the last day or the last couple of days. So if that's going to be an issue down there, we're going to have maybe the 11th Circuit rule one way. They're not bound by what the D.C. Circuit just said, which was 3-0, Trump, you lose. They figured, we're the Supreme Court over all the circuits. We should take this. And as the argument that they're just playing into the delay, they would answer, I don't mean to keep dumping on him, that it took over 2 years to appoint a special prosecutor. And while Jack Smith has moved expeditiously, they're going to say, so have we, the U.S. Supreme Court. We stood an argument in 2 months. What do you want from our lives?
Well, you know how I feel about Jack. Jack Smith is, as you say, he's been the gold standard. But Merrick Garland has just been so much weak sauce that I can't believe, it's. I can't believe that guy was not. Wasn't he a Supreme Court nominee? Merrick Garland wasn't he?
He was the one they would net McConnell. And there are some people who are actually lamenting McConnell because they think, the next Republican leader will be even worse. He'll be just as bad as McConnell, but he'll be an isolationist. Let Russia and China win-ist. But yes, McConnell infamously never called a vote on Merrick Garland. He said it was too close to the election. It was 10 months in front of the election. That's way too close. And then when they had a chance to put Barrett on there, when RBG passed away, suddenly 3 weeks wasn't too close. 3 weeks was plenty of time to put a Supreme Court justice on there when it was one that they wanted. It was way too early to do it for Obama when Merrick Garland was the nominee. And of course, the knock on Merrick Garland was that he was very moderate, that they put him up because he was someone the Republicans would act on. And of course, McConnell and the Republicans had the last laugh, and they got to put they got to put Gorsuch up there and not Merrick Garland on the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah, the Democrats trying to somehow go moderate so they get it through. The Republicans don't mess with that stuff. They just they grab it and then shove it down your throat. That's exactly what they did. And, it's interesting, those justices to whom you've referred, I want to say Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett and maybe Gorsuch. Were they involved in the Bush-Gore case in the or is that too long ago? I feel as though they might have been helping the Republicans steal the presidency in Florida, that vote in Florida that went to the Supreme Court. They were not Supreme Court justices then, I understand, but they helped. They were the lawyers working on that case for the Republicans.
Some of them were, and of course, Clarence Thomas does go back that far. And some of the people that we really admire, Justice O'Connor, she was the fifth vote to give the election to Bush and not Gore. As people said, with all that counting and recounting and all those close states, there was only one vote that ever really mattered. 5-4 on the U.S. Supreme Court to stop the count. They counted the vote later on, Mark, and guess who won Florida when they counted it all fair and square? Gore.
Yeah, Gore won. And, it was ridiculous. I'd love to talk about that. We should have I'd like to do a separate video that we drop just about that and how that election was stolen. Think about how things would have been so very different. I mean, if Gore had been given the presidency rightfully, and you would have had Iraq, you would have had an environmental awareness and policy and strategy moving forward. The GOP knows how to play hardball, but the Democratic Party doesn't seem to know how, says Walter. I want to ask you about one other case, and then I want to get to the Henley case, just because I think it's so extraordinary, and I know you've been following it, which has nothing to do with politics. But Trump will have to stand trial in the Stormy Daniels case, right? Explain to me why and how that's going to proceed, because I think a lot of those details may be part of the zeitgeist moving forward, and that's going to be uncomfortable for Trump.
Well, I think that, if you could have had this all to do over again, it would have been much better if the Jack Smith case had gone first. It would have also been better if the Mar-a-Lago case had been filed by Jack Smith in Washington, D.C., which is where I always thought it belonged, where there clearly was venue. And then that case might be going along, because they would have had a judge who was, to say the least, more familiar with national security procedures, could have handled it more expeditiously and gotten that case to trial. But it doesn't look like either one of those federal cases is going to go first. Of course, the case down in Atlanta in state court is a mess. And so the fourth one, criminal case, looks like it's going to go first. It looks like it's really going to go in March. This is the one that has been referred to as the hush money case, the case with the porn actress, the case with Michael Cohen. The DA's office would like it to be treated with more respect and be called an election interference case. Because what happened was that you have to file correct campaign finance statements. You have to say where you really got money from, where the money went. Those are signed under penalty of perjury. So Trump wants to pay off Stormy Daniels, because he's already had the touch women in their private parts. They'll go for it if you're a celebrity. He's already had that terrible, salacious, tape come out. And he figures this is really it with the suburban women that I need. If now Stormy Daniels talks about it, and she's going to talk about it in the context of he and Melania have just had a baby. Instead of being home with his wife who's just given birth, he's out philandering with this Stormy Daniels and paying her a lot of money for sex. So he wants to hush that up. But in order to hush it up, he has Michael Cohen pay her off. He wants the National Enquirer to take care of her. The National Enquirer has taken care of one of his mistresses, paid her hush money to basically buy her story and then kill it. The National Enquirer is not interested in buying Stormy Daniels' story and killing it. So if they're going to pay her off, Trump has to pay her off. And allegedly, he pays her off through Michael Cohen. They phony up a whole bunch of campaign records. They phony up a whole bunch of New York business records. And so he's on trial, Trump is, for causing Michael Cohen to pay that money to do this side deal, to make it look like it was something that he wasn't. And like a business that, creates two sets of books, he created a whole set of books that were phony, and that's a violation of New York law. Now, he has to know he's violating New York law, and especially New York campaign law, to boost it up to a felony. So after it goes all the way to trial, he may only be convicted of a misdemeanor. And on top of that, it just seems improbable that he would be sent off to prison, Rikers Island, like his CFO was for this. So the idea that it's going to have a huge impact on people's vote, that he might be found guilty, which will also explain, well, it's a bunch of people in New York City who don't like me. I mean, it would have to be 12 unanimously, but Trump would spin it. It's a bunch of New Yorkers who don't like me. It's all political. It's a nothing burger. And I don't think that he would be sitting in jail having to run from jail in October for the presidency. So people think, how much impact is it really going to have politically? It's a bit of a fraught case. It's a bit of a difficult case. And one last thing, the New York DA there, Alvin Bragg, he and his predecessor, this Vance fellow, they had a great case against Trump. They had basically all the phoning up criminally that ended up being just a civil case. The case where he ended up having to pay $400 million was all chargeable and was going to be charged, Mark, as a criminal case. There were two special prosecutors. When they weren't going to charge it as a criminal case, didn't get charged by his predecessor, Vance. It didn't get charged by Bragg. They threw their hands up in the air. They both resigned. One of them wrote a book. And then in the fullness of time, they charged what looks like sort of a weaker piece of the whole strong whole. There's a strong whole of allegations that should have been all brought by the DA, which was a financial fraud, which was saying the same thing was worth an awful lot of money when he wanted a loan, and saying the same thing was worth a lot less money when it came to paying taxes on it. And it was going to include this campaign violation thing with phoning up the business records in New York. And so now we have a piece of it that I just think is problematic. It'll be entertaining when the trial goes forward, but this is about a lot more than entertainment. This is the future of the nation. And are we going to have somebody who really does have tendencies not to leave power when he loses, like Trump back in there? It's a real, to me, it's very scary for democracy. And that's a real thing. And I don't know if this would be the case I would want to have go first on the allegations that it has, but it looks like whether we like it or not, it's about to go first. late March.
Yeah, as I think you said, and I certainly feel very strongly. I think if you could lead with the documents case, even I think the J6 case is probably the most significant, but the documents case is easy to understand. Why are you hauling thousands of documents out of the White House and putting them in Mar-a-Lago? But as you've so beautifully articulated here before, that case belongs in Washington, and instead they threw it to Florida, and that's where the Trumpy judge is essentially delaying it. I see that judge denies Trump request to post a $100 million bond instead of impossible. The $464 million penalty goes forward.
Can I comment on that just for a moment before we get to Don Henley? Go ahead, Kim.
Can you dicker with this court like that? Well, you want me to pay X, but here's what I'm going to pay you. I mean, this is not a negotiation, right?
No, he treats it like he's at the bazaar, right? And it's like, what do you mean? $100 for the rug? I'll give you $10. You start to walk away. I tell you what, I'll sell it for $80. This is how Trump rolls. But number one, you can't do that with a court. On top of that, the idea that there is some unfairness to this is unbelievable. 1% of appeals are won. So as between the 1% person, the 1% chance of winning, you don't get to pay at the end because people will change the assets, they'll bust out, they'll do something fraudulent, they'll legitimately go broke. If you get a judgment and 99% of the judgments are affirmed on appeal, you have to either get the judgment collected then, not in years when the appeal is over, or you've got to post a bond for it. This is like civil procedure 101. This is not some strange thing. And the idea that, well, Trump might have to sell 40 Wall Street. Oh my God, he might have to sell Trump International on Central Park West. The whole allegation is that he got those properties. The reason that he has 7 or 8 great properties is because he lied to get them. He cheated the banks. They gave him lower interest rates. Instead of giving him a 5% rate, they gave him a 3% rate because they thought he had so much collateral to cover it. And so he saved millions and millions of dollars. He was able to buy 7 or 8 properties. Had he been honest, he could have bought 3 or 4 properties, let's say. So the idea that he has to sell 1 property now because he got called to account for all the cheating that he did is like, oh my God, he might have to sell 40 Wall Street. I worked at 40 Wall Street the summer that I worked on Wall Street during law school at Berkeley. And let me tell you, 40 Wall Street was a beautiful place. It'll be beautiful again without Trump's name on it. No harm will be done.
I'm so out of time. Give me 90 seconds on this Henley case in New York. He's essentially, it's about the lyrics to Hotel California, but it's become this tawdry case involving a hooker who's 16 years old. And, it's really gross.
You may remember November 1980 as when Reagan beat Carter, but it also is when the Eagles broke up. And in the depression of the Eagles breaking up, Don Henley says he took it very hard. It's a criminal case. And so the prosecutor wants to take the sting out of the revelation that Don Henley, their star witness, has a prior misdemeanor. So he described the prior misdemeanor, and that's what is tawdry for being with this 16-year-old escort, doing a lot of drugs with her. He says he didn't have sex with her, but he did a lot of drugs with her. He ended up with a misdemeanor on account of this episode. But the remarkable thing about it is that it's in criminal court. The remarkable thing is that it's not just a lawsuit between Henley, who can afford to bring a lawsuit, and the people that he wants to sue. He's gotten the district attorney down there in New York to run with this case. There's no jury. It's a judge trial. It could have been a jury trial. The defendants and the DA had to waive jury, which probably makes sense because, Mark, you and I have talked about this, the power that charming celebrities have. And a lot of times people think that it's very hard to beat a celebrity in front of a jury. And so the defendants are not trying to do that. But my question, especially now I'm a criminal defense attorney, is why are these 3 people in criminal court? The person who supposedly took the notes, that is the writing pad on which the original lyrics of Hotel California were written by Henley, he lent that to somebody to use to make a book. Then they didn't like the book. Him and Glenn Fry didn't like the book, so they never published the book. This guy who was going to write the book ended up with these notes. He sold these notes of this song to one of the defendants for $50,000, right? It wasn't like it was hot stolen property. It was all over the place that it was hot. And he didn't buy it for $5, didn't buy it for $100. He bought it for $50,000, the price for a collectible, lyrics like that. And then this one criminal defendant sold it to the other 2 criminal defendants for $65,000. Again, my question is what they're doing in criminal court. I think this one, may be an acquittal. And the thing that bothers me about this case is this is the same office that's about to prosecute Trump. This looks like not, in my opinion, exercise of good judgment by that office. And to go into the Trump trial with a high-profile acquittal is not how, I'm a former federal prosecutor, that's never how you want to go into anything. You want to win all your cases like I did when I was a prosecutor, and you want the world to know we win our cases. I mean, it won't make Trump plead guilty, but it will not make it look better that they have a high-profile acquittal. And I don't understand why this case is in criminal court and not in civil court, except as the judge said yesterday when they had testimony that there were 4 guitars on Hotel California. It may not be relevant, but it sure is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. So essentially, when you say an acquittal, you're talking about those accused of this, the rare book dealer, the memorabilia people who are also involved in the chain of provenance with the lyrics. They've all pleaded not guilty, and they may be indeed acquitted. Thanks, David. We're out of time. Love talking to you, and I look forward to next week, and we'll see you on all the different media outlets that you frequent between now and then.
That screenshot that you showed at the beginning was me on Fox in New York City.
And of course,
huge story in New York City because the trial's going on in New York City. And my goodness, it's Don Henley. You know, I heard Hotel California driving over here to do your show. I thought they were going to report on this. No, it was just the millions of times that Hotel California's played on the internet and on the radio.
Huge song. And next time, move the throw pillow in front of the diploma, please. David Katz, everybody. See you, David. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.